Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Now on Sunday, Moldova's President Maia Sandu was re-elected with 54% of the vote, keeping the nation on its pro-European path despite claims of significant Russian interference. Now in her victory speech, Sandu promised to serve all Moldovans, though upcoming parliamentary elections could challenge her party's influence. Now, with nearly 98% of votes counted, Sandu held a clear lead over Alexander Stoyanoglu, a Kremlin-aligned newcomer backed by the pro-Russian Party of Socialists, which labeled Sandu an illegitimate president following the results. Now, joining me now to discuss the outcome of these Moldovan elections is Małgorzata Bonikowska, President at the Center for International Relations. Greetings, Bonikowska. Thank you so much for being with us here on TVP World this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let me ask you, let's begin with this one first. So, Moldova's National Security Advisor described massive interference by Russia in the election with a high potential to, of course, impact the results. Could you explain to us what types of interference were observed and, of course, their possible effects on the outcome of these elections?
Yes, indeed. Moldova is a very important place for Russia, but also for us. As you know, it's squeezed between the European Union and Ukraine. And also a part of Moldova is considered by Russia as an independent state, Naddniestrze, which is for us a part of Moldova, but for Russia is an independent state, very, very pro-Russian. So what Russians try to do is they try to capture attention of those Moldovans who are pro-Russians, but also they want to buy votes with money, just, corrupting the voters to convince them to vote for the pro-Russian option, meaning anti-Maia Sandu electorate. And of course, this is not acceptable. And what we can see, also confirmed by the observers from OSCE Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, is that elections in Moldova were right. There were no incidents of violations of the procedures. And most of the Moldovans, even if it's a tiny margin, but they voted for the current president, Maia Sandu, who is a pro-European president, leading a pro-European camp. So for Russia, this was a very, very big issue, and we hopefully have a very clear situation right now that Moldovan society is going to be closer to the European Union, not close to Russia.
Now, if we just stay on Russia for just a moment, now President Sandu's main rival, of course, Mr. Stoyanoglu, was backed by the pro-Russian Party of Socialists. Now, of course, he promotes strong ties to Moscow, like you've just broken that down for us. Now, how significant is his base of support within Moldova?
Well, to be honest, Moldova is having this issue about identity. The population is divided into, let's say, 1/3 who are feeling Romanians, or 1/3 who are feeling Russians, and 1/3 who is feeling Moldovans with pro-Western feelings. So Russia has certain background, considering also the fact of history of this country, which is artificially created in between Romania and Russia during imperialistic Russian Tsar time. So there are some people in Moldova who may think, okay, the European Union perspective is not necessarily what they want to be in. However, the majority of the society is pro-European, and some of the people consider themselves very, very close to Romania, which, of course, as you know, is a member of the European Union. So I think Maia Sandu's camp and party is leading this pro-European movement and pro-European sentiments in the Moldovan society, and it's building a very clear identity of Moldovans who speak, by the way, the language, Romanian language, that they belong to the European family, not to the Russian hemisphere.
Right, but now, so given the results, of course, I mean, just like you mentioned, right, so Moldovians are integrating more towards and leading towards the European path, and they may be relieved. But now parliamentary elections are coming up next July. Do you think that Moldova should still, regardless, remain cautious about the stability of their pro-European direction?
Well, as I said, the majority of people feel absolutely European, close to the European values and European project. As you know, Moldova, together with Ukraine, got the status of candidate country, and they started the negotiation process. So that's a very encouraging instrument of building this identity in Moldovan society, that they do belong to the European family, that they do belong to the West. And of course, the closest neighbor is Romania, where many people have relatives, they speak the same language. So there is a very strong base for that. By the way, the young Moldovan society is very well educated, and the activists of the party of Maya Sandu are very, very westernized. But in the same time, of course, Moldova was created as a Soviet republic. So the problem Soviet Union and then Russia created is divisions in the society. And the problem also with Naddniestrze, which is a kind of a territory which is dominated now and controlled by the pro-Russian forces within the Moldova territory, it poses a big issue to the Moldovan government to keep integrity of the country. And of course, Russia, who invaded Ukraine, looks at Moldova as possibly the next step. So we are all aware of the very dangerous environment Moldova is in. And of course, if Ukraine fails, Moldova can be just the next one as far as the countries on the list of Putin to attack on. So Maya Sandu's government and Maya Sandu as a person tries to do everything possible to protect the country against this bad scenario and implement all the measures which can eliminate this kind of alternative for the country. It's very pro-Western government. It is with a very good connection, towards not only the European Union, but also the US. And it searches for instrument of stability within the Moldovan state in order to avoid any possibility in the future, not only of the Russian attack, but also of any dependency of Moldova from Russia.
What can you say is the current status of the SOR party? Correct me if I'm wrong. The Moldovan fugitive billionaire Ilan Shor is now in Israel. Can you confirm this?
I don't know, but I know it's a very big issue in Moldovan society because Moldova, since independence in 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, went through different phases as all the post-Soviet republics. Let's not forget, in 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed, there were 14 independent states which emerged, plus Russian Federation. Moldova was one of them. However, Moldova had a big number of people who were, by identity, who were close to Russia, who didn't want anything else than being with Russia. So the very big challenge for Moldovan society was, and it's still the case, to find their own national identity as Moldovans, and in the same time to eliminate all the oligarchs and all the people who would like to move the country towards Russian Federation, also in terms of capital, money, and also some practices which are not accepted by our Western population. What you mentioned is also a very important thing, and the Moldovans know that some of the previous important people in politics were using Moldovan resources and Moldovan economy to just become richer. And there was this case when millions of money which belonged to the Moldovan population were just simply stolen and put outside the country. So I think Maya Sandu's party, this one of the very, very clear examples and objectives of this party is to make a very clear end to these procedures and to clean up the country. There is no acceptance for corruption, no acceptance for oligarchy, and no acceptance to using public funds for private purposes.
Ms. Bonikowska, the European Union has just approved a 1.8 billion euro growth plan for Moldova, right? Aimed for, of course, economic reform, a closer EU integration. Now, how might this aid package shape Moldova's future prospects and trajectory?
Well, it is very important because for Moldovan society, especially young Moldovans, it's very important to get this very clear message from the European Union side that Moldova is considered to be a European country, is on its way towards the EU membership in the future. The negotiations have started. Moldova has a status of a candidate country. So all the instruments on all the measures taken into reforming this country and change it from being a post-Soviet state into a very promising Western economy are to be taken. And Maya Sandu's party is exactly looking at this direction. So I think the European Union activity, not only financial, but in all means, activity as understand it as diplomatic support, as activity during the elections, as clear promise that the European Union has this scenario, has this offer on the table for Moldova to become one day the European Union member, play absolutely crucial role for this transition. We are all remembering in Poland how important this was for us in the 90s, that the European Union gave us this perspective, not only of the negotiations, but also of the membership. But it works the same way for Moldovans today.
Now, you mentioned, of course, about those the package for the reforms, but just specifically, what can you say are areas where Moldova is facing pressure to improve? Just as a quick question before we finish the interview.
The biggest problem for Moldova is territorial integrity, because, as I mentioned, there is this, let's say, 1/4 of the country occupied by Russian forces, and it is a concern for the government in Chisinau. What next is a squeezed territory in between Moldova and Ukraine as of now. But if Russia advances in Ukraine, there were the scenarios, and that's nothing secret. Then Russians were planning to invade not only Odessa, but also for the next step, using Naddniestrze as a part of, as a place of reference, Moldova as well. So it's territorial integrity, but also independent sovereignty of this country. That's one. That's the most important challenge for the government. And second is to fulfill all the needs in order to continue being closer and closer to the European Union standards, and one day, together with Ukraine, enter the European Union as a full member.
Thank you so much, Ms. Małgorzata Bonikowska, President at the Center for International Relations, for breaking down those Moldovan elections for us and for the future of the country. Thank you so much for being with us here on World Talks.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. But just in a moment, we are going to speak to our next guest, so don't go away.